All right, you guys. One of our another picks for the top 5 would have to be Charles Dana Gibson, The Gibson Girl, and Her America is one of a cheap Dover book you can get on him, which would probably suffice for 90% of you. If you really want to go and get nuts, these big, large format ones, I found it at an antique store. They're out of print. They're old. They're expensive. You know, they're not terribly. I mean, I think each one of these was $100 or $70 or something. I think a steal. If you like him as much as I do, you can. I mean, not only is his inking, he's just a master of indication of features, facial expressions, posing, everything. You could probably build your whole compositional illustration career off of just his work and borrowing bits and pieces of his corners of his illustrations, revamping them. We were just talking how you could turn that. We saw one a minute ago, and I go, you could just turn that into a bunch of orcs or a bunch of whatever, you know, for a concept for Lord of the Rings or something. And it was like a wagon with a bunch of these, you know, people. But you could just repurpose these things. I've used them many times for inspiration for my own works, using them. But just the sheer amount of inking this guy did. And the funny thing is, a lot of people don't realize how much this guy. This was probably one of the highest paid illustrators of all time. Yeah. I think it was like late 1800s. He was getting like $3,000 for one of these. I mean, that would be, think about that. I mean, that would be a lot now. You know, that was like freaking 100 years ago. You know, he was like a movie star of the time. You know, there was no color printing. He brought to life these images, and again, just stellar. But one of my favorite inkers of all time, prolific as can be. I mean, freaking just hammered this stuff out. Can't say enough about him. I love his blend. It's mostly quill. I do a bunch of this online. I think I did 4 different heads of his. Just showing you how I perceive him to work and how I think he works. Of course, there's no tutorials, no videos, watching him actually do his thing. So you have to reverse engineer it, look for unfinished pieces, look for his pencils, look for how much pencils he was doing underneath it. And that's kind of part of the fun detective work of reverse engineering any of your old masters that happened before there was photographs, before there was cameras, before there were video. You just have to learn like a detective to strip them down and basically relearn how they think through reverse engineering their work. So one of my favorite things to do, it's a great way to learn, and it can be a lot of fun. So Doug, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Gibson. I think Jeff's right. I mean, you could go through his collection of work, like this book or the Gibson Girl and Her America, and there's dozens of heads, and you could study all these heads and dozens of expressions. And what was interesting about Gibson is the way he drew women became the fashion style of the time. He was that much of a rock star that all these women wanted to look like the Gibson Girl. And so he was kind of a fashion trendsetter of his time. But just really, I mean, even just his hands, the delicate gestures of hands, and the virtuoso nature of something like that, it's so simple and works so well. But just a head like that, or even these background heads.
Oh, they're beautiful.
Yeah, he still takes care, even in those background heads. He's like, even this guy way back here, he's just a few flicks, and it's like you could tell that guy's character. And that's what I think so really interesting about his work, is it feels so loose and energetic, but yet it's so thought out and poetic, yes.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that you don't realize the difficulty of is when you're trying to teach somebody as a teacher. And we'll have a train coming through. We're not going to probably cut it, so I'm just going to let it roll through because these are gritty, man. These are down and dirty. This guy's going to freaking ride it through. I'm telling you. Come on, baby, get it through. Okay, so indication, probably the hardest thing to teach somebody. How do you indicate something that looks more like a thing than it actually does with 5 strokes versus 500? Perfect example. These heads, these indications of the hands, the amount, sheer, again, stripping away of all the superficial into only essential statements in order to get a read is one of the hardest arts to teach and one of the most valued as a professional. Right? Indication versus rendering. And whether you're a digital painter, digital painters know it all too well. I mean, how much indication and how much indication they use.
And I think one thing, like this piece right in here, he's just showing how good he is. He's like, okay, this woman's wearing a veil. This is how you do a face under that veil in ink. That's super hard.
Yeah, and he just makes it. Probably did it like, yeah, I don't even want to know. But yeah, and the little pinky in the hand playing the guitar, and the indication of a shoe coming right at you with what, 5 strokes, if that. This one down here, blowing the whole edge out and letting it be a lost edge, hitting 5 key strokes. You can feel the weight of the shoe on the ground. You can see how it melts in there. A lot of people would outline that, kill that whole, melting in and feeling of it becoming organic into the ground plane. Just everything on it. If you pick any area of it, it's just beautifully and masterfully indicated. And we can just go one after another into his vignetting ability, which is like Cornwell or any of them, their ability to cut areas out creatively and find a place to end the story in a very, again, poetic and beautiful manner is an art that is not as practiced today as it was back then. But again, guys like Drew Struzan and people that did the movie poster vignettes and all that kind of stuff borrowed heavily from this kind of knowledge. And it's montaging and vignetting, something my dad's really big on. And when we teach sketchbooking and stuff, we do a lot of work on that, trying to learn what makes a good vignette, what makes a good, pictorial arrangement around type, around this, around that, telling a story, whether you're doing it for comics, graphic novels, you're doing storyboarding, whatever. I mean, you use it for all kinds of cool stuff. But anyway, this book is phenomenal. It's definitely one for the collectors. It's not one that you would probably track down unless you are kind of nerdy like me and Doug and I, and you really like to nerd out on this stuff. But again, hopefully we're introducing you to some people that you don't know and open your eyes to why we like them so much. And then it's up to you now to just go and do some more exploration. Try to copy some of these in ink. You can do them in ballpoint pen. You can straight do them in quill. You can do a pencil sketch first, which he probably did, then go back in with the quill. You could even do them in brush. I mean, you can make, I was seeing a number of ways. I've even taken these and actually taken one like this scene here and translated it into oil paint and invented the color and painted that whole scene in oil paint on a piece of masonite to just see if I could reconstruct that. So now you're taking his composition, learning from his composition, translating from a linear to a tonal, and then injecting your own color feel into it. So you're working like 5 layers of invention. And that's how you start to learn to cultivate an ability to invent, manipulate. If you want to be a really high-end conceptor, visual development, those are the kind of skill sets you got to start kind of developing. And you got to have fun, pick fun ways to do it, and that's one thing. I remember doing that years ago when I was a student. So anyway.
And I just looking at this piece right here, I mean, that's amazing. That's like a quick sketch. And you could almost go through this piece and count how many lines are in there.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. And then you get into one like this one, and it gets into, but then you get this hand that you go, that should not freaking work. Yeah. But yeah, I totally get it. And this guy here.
And these people too. Yeah, I know. He's great.
Like,
just his expression.
I know, like that versus her discontent and just the eyes like just kind of like smug, like I am so freaking over this. And this guy just terrified. This guy, I mean, just look at the emotion. That is so freaking hard to do. And he is just like that with it. So I remember Fred Fixler, my teacher, saying, get Gibson and do like all your quick sketch head studies from Gibson and just go in and just head after head after head. So what I would tell my students to do is take a warm up and just do your oval warm up with like 100 ovals, get the Gibson book out, put it up and just start plugging heads into each one of those ovals and spend about 10 to 15 seconds on each one of them and just pull out the essentials and the indication. And that's how you start learning how to indicate. It also helps your dexterity, but it helps you to cut to the chase and say, what is the essential elements I need to get this to read in 5 seconds, in 10 seconds, in 10 strokes, not in 100 strokes. And the better you get at that, the better you get an indication. It's also very high level discernment, which is really, again, these are hard things. When you try to teach somebody that, it's like you got to come through the back door and figure out fun, creative ways to do it because it's almost impossible to even verbally explain what it is you're trying to get them to do, So anyway, master of all those things.
Yeah.
One of the best, Gibson. Need to say more. So that's
really the Rockwell of his day. I mean, with the expressions and these are maybe humorous to us, but they were back then, like Rockwell.
Yeah, and he had these characters that he would kind of string through this whole story that he built off of one character and his life and how he moved through it. And it was awesome. So really fun guy to look at. I hope if you didn't know him, that it maybe opens up some doors for you. Anyway, thanks for joining us. And again, we've covered our 5 favorite inkers, and I hope you enjoyed us just kind of talking a little bit about why we like them. So have fun in the ink, and we'll see you when we see you. Take care. Cheers.